I'm going to be showing you some video tips today for the stitches in the Tracks in the Snow Convertible Mini Shrug Pullover. I've got a miniature version of the sleeve here, and that's in my Magic Wand DPN cozy to keep the stitches on. The sleeves are worked in the round, and you can use DPNs or you can use a circular needle, using any technique for working a small diameter in the round. So you'll have the right number of stitches on for your size, and then you're going to be working the sleeves in twisted rib all the way along. You're working the round on the main section of the sleeve from the wrist to the underarm area, and then we'll work flat for the sleeve head, a curved section at the top of the sleeve. We'll also work in creases as we go up the sleeve using make one right and left stitches. So I'll be showing you those as well as the twisted rib stitch worked both in the round and flat. So let's look at a basic round. You can see the twisted rib is a very stretchy rib, and the knit stitches keep very close together, while the purl stitches in between them stretch quite far apart. We'll be starting the rounds initially with a knit stitch, but when we do increases that will change. But the knit stitch is not the basic knit stitch. We're working a knit stitch through the back loop. So normally we would make our knit stitches through the front loop here and pull the yarn through, or wrap the yarn if we like to wrap the yarn. When we are working through the back loop, we're going to work here instead. This is the back loop. We'll work through there, wrap the yarn if that's your knitting style, or pick up the yarn if that's not, and pull it through. And you can see this gives a knit stitch where the two strands are crossed over here, and that makes the rib particularly tight and crisp looking. The purl stitch is the regular purl stitch. And so again, let's look at that knit stitch. Let's see how that looks from the front. We're going through the back loop, picking up or wrapping the yarn and bringing it through to create that crossed over stitch. If you do make a regular knit stitch, one probably won't matter, so probably don't go back and unpick all the way. As long as on the next round you do the twisted one again, it probably will stay quite well hidden. So that's just a tip if you find one that you've missed a couple of rows down. So let's work that all the way around, and then we'll look at the increases. So I'm at the end of the round now, and I want to make my increases. We're doing make one left and make one right increases. So there are lots of different ways to do these, and knitters have different ways to remember them, and you're welcome to do them in any way you choose. You could even substitute for a different increase if you want to. The important thing is you make increases that look nice on the start of the round and on the end of the round. So when I want to make a right leaning increase, which is the first increase at the start of the round, I use my right needle to pick up the loop between the previous stitch and the next stitch, and I put it on the needle, and then I knit in the usual direction. Now the rest of this sleeve is knitted through the back loop. This is going through the front loop, and I knit that through, and you can see that the front strands leans off towards my right hand. And then I'm going to continue knitting following the stitch pattern I've created. In the pattern this is written as continue in pattern. So I can see the first stitch is my knit stitch, and I'm going to be knitting those through the back loop, and my next stitch is the purl stitch. After each set of increases that you make, you're adding one stitch. So the next time I start this round, I'm going to start with a purl here, because I can see that I'm following a knit stitch here on the second one. So this one will need to be a purl. So I'm going to continue working around, following the pattern of the stitches, and I'll pick up when I get to the end of the round. So I've reached the end of the round, and I know I need to make a make one left increase. Again, lots of different ways to do this, and there's any way that you prefer is fine. You can do other increases as well. It's not particularly important for the pattern which type of increase you make. However, the way I like to do this to make a make one left increase is to put my left needle in, flick the yarn over, and then I work through the back loop. So doing that helps me to remember that I'm using my right needle from the front to start my right leaning increase and my left needle from the front to create my left leaning increase. I work it that way mainly because that helps me to remember which increase I'm making. So then I'm starting here. You can see my last stitch of the original round was a purl stitch. There's a column of purl stitches there after that last knit. And so my last stitch of the next round will be a knit stitch. So here I am ready to start the first stitch after the increase. And here again, we can see there's a purl stitch. So that's a knit stitch. If you can't see, just look to the next one. So this first stitch of this round must be a purl stitch. And we know that anyway because we've added one to a round that previously began with a knit stitch. So purl stitch at the beginning of the round there. Then we're working another twisted knit stitch. We're just following the pattern all the way around, and that's how we're going to continue making our increases to the sleeve. And the next set of increases will be followed by again starting the round with a knit stitch because we've added one and finishing the round with a purl stitch. So every set of increases will alternate, and you'll see that written in the pattern. So let's imagine we've completed our sleeve now, very short sleeve there, and we are going to look at how to continue to make the sleeve head. Now at this point we're going to stop working in the round and start working in flat or turned rows of knitting. So you'll be instructed first of all to cast off some stitches, and you can cast off in pattern if you want to, or you can cast off knitwise. I'll cast off in pattern. Let's imagine I've been asked to cast off 3 stitches at the start of the row. So I'm still doing my twisted rib and purl here, but if you prefer to cast off knitwise, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. You'll be seaming those stitches anyway, nobody's going to see them. And the stitch is nice and stretchy anyway. So there we go, I have cast off my 3 stitches. And to continue working, I need to look at the stitch and see which it is. It's a purl stitch. And while I'm working on the right side, this is the right side, the outside of the sleeve, where you can see the knit ribs are quite tight and twisted where they've been worked through the back loop. On the other side, you can see the knit stitches open a lot more. So that's your wrong side. If ever you need a reference, if you find your project and you're not sure if it's inside out, that's handy to know. So now I need to start with a purl stitch. So I'm going to work around until I get to the end of the stitches I'm supposed to work, knitting through the back loop on the right side and purling in the standard way, just as I did when I was working in the round. So when I get to the end of the round, you can see I've done a purl stitch there, and my last stitch was a knit stitch. Instead of continuing around here, you can see I've already cast off some stitches, so it would just make a bump in the garment. I'm going to turn and start from the wrong side, and again, your reference for the wrong side is that the knit stitches look very open and not tight when the fabric's pulled. Okay, so we know we're on the wrong side there. I'll probably have to cast off a few stitches here, and again I'm going to do that in pattern, although you might want to cast off just purl-wise if you prefer. I'll be doing regular knits on those more open knits. I'll explain that a little bit more. I just want to get a few stitches cast off. So that's my 3 stitches cast off. We can see this would be our underarm on the sleeve. Now as we're working along, we can see the stitches are reversed. So I'm working in what would have been a twisted knit here, and that means to keep the pattern perfectly matching, I need to twist my purls here. So to do that, I'm going to purl through the back loop. This is more awkward than knitting through the back loop, I think. So I'm going to have to bring through here. Actually, it's easiest if I turn that way. I'm going behind the back loop and bringing it through, and that makes my twisted purl stitch. You can just about see that the yarns are crossed there. So that's my twisted purl stitch. Now my knit stitches on this side, on the wrong side, are the purls on the right side, and we know they're not twisted. So I'm going to work just a standard knit through the front loop. So I'm purling through the back loop to twist on the wrong side, and I'm knitting through the front loop to keep the stitch untwisted. And you can see we're maintaining that fabric there where the knits are tight, the knit columns are tight on the right side and open on the wrong side. So you can check your work like that. It is a more awkward stitch, the purl through the back loop. I find it easier to point the needle almost towards me to do it. It might be different if you wrap your yarn rather than picking your yarn up, depending on how you tension your yarn. However, there are not a lot of stitches in the sleeve head, so for me rotating the needle just a little bit there doesn't matter too much. And remember that throughout tracks in the snow cardigan you can alternate between working on the sleeves and working on the lace panel for the body, and it gives a lot of nice variety in knitting. Both can be made at the same time. Just to show you what it would look like if I did continue working the wrong side, as if I we're doing the right side. If ever you get that wrong, it's definitely worth changing. If I did a twisted knit and then an open purl, I'll do a few of those. On the wrong side, you'll start to see that the knits are not as tight. They start to open up where they're not twisted. Here, it's easier to see here. You can see how they get kind of loose and baggy. And then on the, it's not as easy to see, but your purl column will also get narrower. So your knits will get wider and your purls will get narrower. And the sleeve head of your cardigan will probably look very, very different in style than the arm of the sleeve. And there we go, that's how the sleeve head is going to be worked up. We've got our underarm there and we've got our rows working flat, so you can see how the oval sleeve head is starting to form. Let's take a look at how to work the lace in the body of the Tracks in the Snow cardigan. The lace is a fairly simple pattern combining cable columns and eyelet columns, and I'll show you how to work both of those today. I won't be going through the full stitch repeat, that's in the pattern. However, I'm going to show you all of the techniques involved. So the wrong side rows are all fully purled apart from the first stitch, which is knitted just to maintain a nice tension on the end, and this is an example of one of the right side rows. You'll set up your cable column by knitting 6 at the start. Then you'll do a yarn over, and next we're going to follow that with a left leaning decrease, a slip, slip, knit, decrease. So slip, slip, and knit those 2 stitches together. You can see that decrease leans over to the left, knit 1, and then to pair the left leaning decrease, we match that with a right leaning decrease of knit 2 together. So we're just going to knit those 2 stitches as if they were one, and then do a yarn over. And so you can see how that one leans in towards the right, that one leans in towards the left, and they have a yarn over on each side. Next, I'm going to work the next cable column of 6 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I'm going to repeat that pattern from the yarn over to the 6 stitches of cable all the way to the end, and then I will knit the final stitch to give me that even tension on the end. That's final column is going to be worked in garter stitch, knitted both sides, and that will give us an edge to seam to the button bands and to the sleeves of the cardigan. The other edge will be cabled along there. It'll have no seaming edge, and that will give a scalloped edge to the front of the cardigan. So the next round is going to show the other row of the lace that has different techniques. And in this one we're going to need a cable needle. So I like this kind of J or hook shaped cable needle, and I like to use it by taking the stitches off the needle and then putting them back on the needle. Some people will knit straight from this. I don't like knitting from a plastic needle onto a metal needle, so I put them back on. But if you have a different way of cabling, or you like to use a different cable needle, or you like to cable without a cable needle, then that's absolutely fine too. So there are 2 cables in this pattern. Both of them are 6 stitch cables, and one of them is a cable where the first few stitches come in the front and cross over, and the other one brings the first few stitches in the back and crosses over, and it adds a little bit of variety to the pattern. So we'll be working both of those in this row, and we'll work the other row of the lace stitch pattern. So we're going to start by cabling 6 stitches to the front, and I'm going to take off my 3 of my 6 cable stitches and just hold them at the front of the work while I knit the next 3. So we're just knitting in the regular way here. We're not twisting the stitches like we do on the sleeves. And then, as I say, you can knit those stitches off the cable needle if you want to, but I prefer to pass them back onto the needle to knit. I think I get a more even tension working on the metal needles. There we are, they're back on the needle, and I'm just going to knit those back on now. 1, 2 and 3. And so my first cable will have those stitches lifting over to the front. And then I'm going to work my next row of the lace stitch pattern. So I'm going to knit 1. So I'll do the yarn over, and then my next stitch is going to be a double decrease. So I'll decrease 3 stitches into 1, but I want to keep this stitch as the front stitch so that it's more symmetrical. So I'm going to slip these 2 stitches onto my needle. I'm going to knit this stitch, and then I'm going to pass these stitches back over the one that I've just knitted, and you can see the center stitch travels up the front while the stitches on either side sit behind it. I'm going to do another yarn over, and then I'm going to knit the last stitch of the lace column. So there's my lace column now. You can see it has this kind of chevron pattern with yarn overs on either side, and that will continue all the way up. It's a very simple lace pattern, and you can see I've got my cable pattern here with the cable crossing in the front from the right to the left. And my next cable is going to be different to that. I'm going to take those 3 stitches off the needle, and I'm going to hold them instead at the back, and you'll see how they the stitches on the right stay at the back in the cable, and the stitches on the front on the left cross over in front. So I'll knit the next 3 stitches, 1, 2 and 3, and then as I say, I like to pass the stitches from the cable needle back onto the needle on the other side in order to knit them. I found my tension, particularly in this pattern, maybe with the lace, seemed to work out better than knitting them directly from the cable needle. 1, make sure you get all 3 stitches back on, or your stitches can run, and 3. And there we go. You can see that this cable crosses in the opposite direction to this one, and that's following the shape of the chevron there. And the next pair, you'll be continuing, you'll work across here, you'll work the lace panel, and then you'll work another front cable where the stitches from the right cross in front of the stitches to the left, and that's how the pattern goes. So let's just take another look at that lace there. Start with a knit, yarn over, slip 2 on the needle together, knit 1, and pass the 2 slipped stitches over the needle to create that centered symmetrical decrease, another yarn over and knit one, and that's the alternate row of the lace. And then we would do our right cable here and knit one on the other end, and that creates our lace panel.